Oh hi, my name's Helena Turner. I'm one of the volunteers here at Lynde House, and one of my passions is spinning. So I thought I would tell you today a little about wool processing and how to spin wool. Now if you notice at Lynde House we do have a big spinning wheel here. Now this is what's called a walking wheel or a great wheel. And a lot of questions I get from children is, where did Sleeping Beauty prick her finger? So you only get the type of spindle on a walking or great wheel, and it's this sharp here. Now here it's made out of wood at Lynde House, but a lot of times they were made out of metal and they were much more sharp. If you notice with a great wheel as well, it doesn't have a treadle. So what a woman would do is when she's spinning the yarn, and I'll come over to this side, right? And she has her wool and she has to walk with the wool and then walk back as it spins, and she moves the great wheel and it spins the wool onto the spindle. A lot of times you'll see other types of spinning wheels that have treadles. Before you can start to spin, you have to get the wool. If you lived on a farm and you would have sheep, the shearing season is in the spring, usually the end of April, the beginning of May, and that's when the sheep would get sheared of their fleece. Now shearing your sheep is just like cutting your hair, so it doesn't hurt the sheep at all. These are a pair of typical sheep shearers that would have been used, and you just use them and you cut the sheep's fleece very, very close to the skin. Nowadays, shearers use something more mechanical, like if you went to the barber and the barber shaved your hair, right? So that's the type of shears that they use now, but much bigger for the sheep. And once the sheep is sheared, you get a whole fleece. Now once we have the fleece, if you can imagine, sheep have been out in the field and they're not very clean. So we're going to have to wash the fleece. The boys would help with the shearing of the sheep, but it's usually a girl's job to then carry on and do the rest of the preparation to start to spin. So now we're going to wash that fleece in very, very hot water. And we need to wash it about 2 or 3 times. Sheep naturally have lanolin in their fleece, and that's what prevents them from getting all wet in the rain. It protects their skin. So we want to keep some of that lanolin, but we also want to get a lot of the dirt out of it. Can you imagine the sheep running in the fields and they're collecting all the burrs and all the different grasses and fibers? So this is a piece of sheep wool that has been washed, but it hasn't been cleaned. So now once you wash it, you're going to have to lay it out in the sun. We're going to put it over a fence on a nice, bright, windy, sunny day, and it may take 2 or 3 days to dry. Now sheep come in multiple colors. They only come in white, or this one's black. We can get gray and brown, so it doesn't give you a lot of colors. Once I've washed the wool, now I have to tease it. If you go out hiking, you might find something called a plant called teasel. And in the olden days, they would use that plant to comb out all of the bits of fiber. So, but one of the things that children can do, and one of their jobs would be to tease the wool. So you take little bits of the wool and you pull it. And what you're getting out is all of the little bits of grass and burrs and twigs, and you keep pulling it until you have a beautiful, nice, fluffy cloud, right? That's what you want to get. You want to get out all, there's little more bits of grass and twigs. There's some more grass and twigs. Even though it's clean, it's still full of all these twigs. We have to get them out. And now I'm going to get this beautiful fluffy cloud. Now here's a beautiful piece of wool that has the locks. Some sheep have really long fibers, and look at the locks on that, all nice and curly. That's a beautiful lock of wool. There's many different types of sheep, and each sheep may give you different types of wool. Some sheep will give you nice, really soft wool, like a merino sheep. Other sheep will give you more coarser wool, like a Corriedale sheep. So depending on the type of wool you want will depend on the type of sheep that you might have. So now I've teased this quite a bit, and look, I have this lovely, fluffy cloud. And now there's still a little bit of fiber in there, but not as much. So can you imagine you would have to do this for that whole sheep's wool? Clean it out like this. Now, once I've got it to this point, it's still not done. There's still more processing that I have to do. So now I have a set of carders. They have very sharp teeth on the inside, and we need to carve the wool. What we want is all the fibers to run in the same direction. So again, this would be a job that everyone in the house could do. These are jobs that you would do in the winter time, when you had more time after harvesting. And you're going to load your carders. And again, this is another long process. And you take the other carder and you comb them, right? Just like you're combing your hair. And what we're doing is getting all of the fibers to line up. And I'm going to flip them over, and I'm going to do it on the other side. We want it all nice and straight. This also gets out any more of the little bits of debris from the wool, like more twigs, more bits of grass will also come out at the same time as you're doing this. Now, once I've done this, then I'm going to put them together and clear the carders of the fiber, and I'm going to roll it all up into what's called a roll leg. There we go. So you have a nice piece of sheep's wool, all nice and ready to spin. Now what I like to call this is a sheep's tail. Doesn't that look like a sheep's tail? Right? So now it's ready to spin. But at this point, we can decide whether we want to dye it, or we can wait till after it's spun to dye it. So at this point, I'm going to just talk about how to dye it. Okay, so this is some wool fiber that has been dyed, and these have been dyed using natural dyes. So we can use things like different types of flowers. Right, so we have some calendula and some black-eyed Susan and some goldenrod. So all of those can make all sorts of different dyes. These ones actually, this one right here is the Queen Anne's lace. So from this flower, that's the color that you're going to get. Now, this one here, the brown one, is from black walnuts. So when they fall off the tree, then you can use it to dye to different colors, rather than just having your plain old black, white, and brown. This one here actually is from sumac berries, mixed in with some other white fibers as well. So to dye the wool, then you have to, again, pick the product that you want, the flowers or the walnuts that you want, and you have to boil them to make a liquid, and then you strain out all the flowers, or strain out the black walnuts. For some things you need to morton the fiber. To use things naturally, we would use alum or vinegar, but if you're going to use black walnut, you don't have to use a mordant at all. It won't run out. It will stay in the fiber. It won't bleed out. Now, you put the mordant wool into the vat of the liquor that you had produced, and you have to boil that for about an hour. Keep it at a simmer. Once you've done that, then you now have to rinse it. And you rinse it and rinse it until none of the color comes out of the fiber. So even though you think you're going to have a nice bright colored piece of fabric or piece of fiber, you may find out that it will be a much different color than you expect. If you try things at home with like beets or cabbage that you think you're going to get a nice red, sometimes it just washes out to be very, very pale. But it's always a good thing to try. Remember that piece we took off the Carters, that nice little sheep's tail that I had, right? So now what I'm going to do is what's called drafting. So I stretch it. If you take a piece of the wool and you just pull it together really tight, it doesn't move, right? But if I spread it out and pull it very loosely, you can see that I'm stretching it. And this is what I want to do. I want to stretch it so that when I spin, once the wheel goes, it's going to spin it and twist it. So what will happen is it's going to twist like this onto the spinning wheel. And this is a modern spinning wheel. As you can see, it doesn't look like the one behind me at all, but you can twist and twist, it'll twist and twist the fiber. So now it's like a nice strong piece of wool or yarn. Once it becomes this, it's now going to be yarn. So I've got a piece on here now, and I like to know who the sheep is that I spin. And this one that I'm spinning right now, this sheep's name is Victoria. So Victoria gave us her wool from her fleece this year. So it's always nice to know, so when I knit a sweater, I know that this is Victoria's wool, right? So here I am drafting it, pulling it, and as I pedal with my foot, I pinch the fiber, I draft and pull it, and let the pinch out, and keep going and keep doing that. So this will have to keep going until I've spun this whole bobbin full. Now you don't have to go really fast. It just goes nicely on its own. It's very relaxing. And like I said before, they used to use the walking wheel behind me, and you would walk and it'd do the same thing, basically pulling the fiber, stretching it, putting a twist in, and spinning it onto the spindle in the walking wheel, or on this type of spinning wheel, it's called a bobbin. Now my spinning wheel is a little different as well. Because it is a modern one, I have a piece that slides, so I can move where the wool's going to spin onto. Some of the older ones, and if you come and see one of the other ones we have here at Lynde House, you'll notice they have little hooks, and you have to then manually move it along so you fill your bobbin evenly. Let's put this back here again. We'll do a little bit more. And if you noticed, I'm always spinning to the right. Once I have this bobbin full, then I'm going to fill another bobbin. And once 2 bobbins are full, then what we're going to do is we will do what's called plying. So if you go to the store and you buy yarn, most of the time you'll find that it's 2 plies. Right now this is just called a single. Once I've filled 2 bobbins, now I'm going to spin it in the opposite direction with the 2 threads, and then that's what's called plying. So then you'll get 2 threads, 2 twists. So when it's plied, I have a piece to show you. So this was a piece of brown and a piece of white that's been plied together so you can actually see the stripe. So that would be what it looks like when it's plied. But you don't have to use 2 different colors. You could just use the same piece of fabric that you've been using. So there's a nice piece here of one that is plied, and this is called a skein. And I have another one here that I dyed. This one I dyed with onion skins. So just different sizes, different weights, different way people spin. Now, what if you didn't have a spinning wheel? You can spin using something called a drop spindle. So this is more of a portable type of way to spin. So basically it's the same, and this one again is a modern one because you can see it does have a hook at the end, right? Some of them are, this is a top whorl because the whorl here is on the top. Some you may find are what's called a bobbin whorl because the bobbin, the whorl is on the bobbin. But this one particular one is called a top whorl. And basically it works the same. You have your fiber that you've pulled out, you draft it a bit, and you give it a spin, and you keep drafting it some more. Now if I pull too, see it's too tight, I can't pull it, I'm going to have to loosen it up so that I can pull it. Right? And give it a spin, and keep spinning it. Again, always going to the right. Oops, just stretch it out a bit. Now they say that spinners have very soft hands, and they do, because all of the lanolin that's still left in the wool that you're spinning with. Now you can spin many different things, right? And you may have heard of people spinning things like wool. You can spin cotton, you can spin flax, you can spin alpaca, you can spin silk, and I've even heard of people spinning rabbit and dog hair. So here we are just spinning off a little bit more, and so this is another fun activity to do to make yarn. Now this particular spindle, drop spindle, I had purchased from a woodworker, and he made a beautiful spindle, but you can get different ones that are just very simple, or if you know someone can make you a very simple one, which is basically a dowel with a big piece of wood there to give you your balance, and it works just as well. Let's see if I can get it to spin. Has a nice balance to it. So those are something that you could do. Here at Lynde House too, they also have what's called a wool winder or a wool clock. Now, you can see it has all these little spokes on it. Once I've spun the yarn, then I'm going to wrap it around all these little spokes, sort of like you can see that this would wrap around like that. And you keep turning it, and turning it, has a little handle here, and you turn it, and depending on the size of it, usually it's like 2 yards around. This one I think looks a little smaller, I haven't measured it, but it's 2 yards around, and then you would turn the handle. And at about the 40th turn, it should pop, or make a click. Now you may have heard the song "Pop Goes the Weasel." So that's what that means, is when it got to the 40th, which is about a skein, it counts. Some of them actually have counters on them, but if it made the pop, now you've got a skein of yarn. So this would be a skein. This is not quite a full skein. It hasn't got 40 wraps on it, but this would be a certain measurement, and once you've got that measurement now, you now have a skein of yarn, and then you would know how many skeins of yarn you needed to knit something. So then you might want to knit something. So I have this lovely little jacket or sweater. They're actually called a bosom buddy, right? That they cover your top and they keep you nice and warm. You remember that some of these old houses, the heating here was not very good. You might only have a fireplace, and so you would get cold. Also, I have some wristlet I would wear, again, to keep my wrists warm, but my hands are still free. I would also maybe knit some socks. So those are some of the things that you might knit. A lot of times they use the wool for weaving. You would weave carpets, you could weave bags You could weave fabric. Wool fabric would have been woven from the yarn that you had spun. If you've been to the Lynde House, you've heard the story of Mary Maria Lynde. Her daughter, Carrie Batts, had made this beautiful needlepoint using some wool. So again, it can be used for artwork around the house. Needlepoint was very popular. This one has been made into a cushion. Another piece of artwork we have at the Lynde House Museum is this yarn reef. Again, this would be something that young ladies would be encouraged to do, and you would make this lovely reef using yarn as an activity. So if you want to do something at home that doesn't take any equipment, much equipment, you have some fiber, you can do what's called finger spinning. So you just take the fiber and you stretch it out when you're drafting, and then you just twist it. It's good to have two people, one holding one end and one holding the other. And then now you just keep twisting it until you have, always in the same direction, until you have a piece of yarn. Another thing you can do is if you have some white wool at home, you could go and you could maybe do some dyeing. So I have a little sample of some things that have been dyed. So you can go and pick some of these flowers, like the black-eyed Susans or the goldenrod. You can pick some of these flowers, and then you can dye different things. You can collect the onion skins from your house. I dyed with dandelions this spring. You might be able to collect other, like the goldenrod. Another fun thing that I'm trying right now, I'm collecting and waiting to see if I have enough. I'm going to try and dye with avocado skins and pits. So anything you think you could try with, again, with the red cabbage or the beets, and have a look at what colors you do actually get. You'll be very surprised that they're not the color that you expect sometimes. The fiber I have is from Windreach Farm. This sheep's name is Victoria, and I would like to encourage you to go up and visit Windreach Farms on their event days. In the spring, they do have a sheep shearing day, and you can go up and see their sheep being sheared. At other times, you may go up and you will see the spinners as well as the dyers at work dyeing and spinning the fiber from the sheeps from the farm. If you don't live in Whitby, you can always visit your own local wool shops. Thank you for joining me today, and I encourage you to come out to Lynde House and see some of our spinning wheels and our artwork, and possibly you may see me here spinning one day.